Imagine spending 10 long years pouring your sweat, savings, and soul into a dream cabin, only to wake up one morning and find the HOA standing outside, claiming it wasn't even yours anymore. But what they didn't know, was that I was a cop, and I had been trained to spot lies, manipulation, and schemes. And trust me, this fight was only getting started. I bought that piece of land when I was barely in my 20s. While most of my friends were busy upgrading their cars or spending weekends at bars, I had one vision: to build a cabin in the woods where I could live life on my own terms. No bosses, no alarms, no nosy neighbors telling me how tall my grass should be. Just me, my tools, and the sound of the forest. Over the course of 10 years, brick by brick, beam by beam, I built what I now proudly call my cabin. It wasn't just wood and stone, it was my bloodline of effort, the place where every scar on my hand had a story. And just when I thought I could finally sit back on my porch, sipping black coffee in peace, that's when the HOA entered the picture. At first, I thought they were just curious. A woman from the HOA, sharp suit, clipboard in hand, and an attitude like she owned the entire mountain, knocked on my door one morning. She introduced herself as Karen, the HOA president. Her first words weren't a hello or a welcome. They were: "This structure doesn't comply with community guidelines. Technically, it belongs under HOA management." I almost laughed. Community? What community? I had lived here alone for years. But apparently, a group of developers had quietly set up an HOA around the area while I was busy building. Now, they were swooping in like vultures, trying to claim what wasn't theirs. I told her politely that my cabin was not for sale, not for negotiation, and definitely not HOA property. But the look on her face told me this wasn't over. She smirked, scribbled something on her clipboard, and left with a warning. "Enjoy your last day of ownership." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about her words felt less like a threat and more like a plan already in motion. And I was right. The very next day, trucks rolled up, workers in vests surrounded my land, and a huge banner read, "HOA property, under new management." They thought I'd panic. They thought I'd give up. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Because this wasn't just my cabin. This was my life's work. And I was ready to fight for it, not just as a man, but as a cop. The morning after those trucks arrived, I stormed outside demanding answers. Workers were hammering signs into the ground like they owned the place. My cabin, now had red tape across the front porch. Karen, the HOA president, was standing at the center of it all, arms crossed, smirking like she had just won. She waved a stack of papers at me and said, "It's all legal. These documents prove the land belongs to the HOA. You've been squatting here illegally." Squatting? That word burned into me. I had poured 10 years into building this home, paying taxes, and securing every permit I needed. My name was on every record. I asked her to hand over the documents. She refused, saying I'd get copies in the mail. But as a cop, I'd seen this play before: fake paperwork, intimidation, and power games. I pulled out my own binder of receipts, tax records, and land deeds. I waved them back in her face. "This land is mine. This cabin is mine. And if you step 1 foot closer, you'll be trespassing." But Karen didn't flinch. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You may be a cop, but here. I make the rules." That was the first time I realized this wasn't just about money or property. This was about power. She wanted to show she could crush anyone who stood against her. Later that night, I drove into town to visit the county clerk's office. I needed to see what kind of stunt she was pulling. Sure enough, someone had forged transfer documents, making it look like the HOA had acquired rights to my land. The clerk admitted the paperwork looked strange, but said it would take weeks to investigate. Weeks? By then, my cabin could be bulldozed. On the drive back, anger mixed with determination. I wasn't going to let some clipboard queen destroy what I built. And as a cop, I had resources, connections Karen didn't know about. When I returned, floodlights lit up my land. The HOA had brought in contractors. They were measuring walls, inspecting the roof, and snapping photos. Karen spotted me and smiled. "Hope you said your goodbyes. Tomorrow, this place gets a new owner." She turned and walked away. I clenched my fists. Tomorrow? No. This battle wasn't ending tomorrow, it was only just beginning. The next morning, I woke up to find a crowd gathered outside. It wasn't just the contractors and HOA board members anymore, it was my neighbors. People I had barely spoken to in the past were suddenly standing on my lawn, whispering, pointing, and watching the drama unfold like it was free entertainment. Karen was in the center again, giving a speech about how the HOA was cleaning up the community. She gestured to my cabin as if it were some rotten structure poisoning the neighborhood. "This cabin violates HOA standards. It was built without our approval, and by law, it falls under our control now," she declared. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking uneasy. That's when I noticed one older man, Mr. Dawson, raising his hand. He cleared his throat and said, "That's not true. I've lived here 30 years. He built that cabin fair and square. HOA didn't even exist when he bought the land." Karen's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "With respect, Mr. Dawson, rules are rules. We can't make exceptions." "Exceptions?" My jaw tightened. This wasn't about exceptions, this was about theft, plain and simple. I stepped forward. "Neighbors, I need you to listen. I'm not against rules. I'm not against order. But what's happening here isn't legal. It's a power grab. Today it's me, tomorrow it could be your home." Some people shifted uncomfortably. A few even nodded in agreement. But Karen clapped her hands, cutting me off. "Enough. This property is now HOA's concern. If you don't leave, we'll call the sheriff." I smiled bitterly. "Go ahead. Call the sheriff. Let's see what they say when they find out I'm one of them." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face went pale for the first time. She hadn't expected that. Suddenly, the tone shifted. The whispers grew louder. People were questioning her, asking why the HOA was moving so fast, why there were no public notices, no votes. Karen turned red, stammered something about efficiency, and stormed off to make a phone call. That was my first small victory. The neighbors weren't all on her side. Some saw through the act. But I knew Karen wouldn't back down. She wasn't the type to accept humiliation. That night, I kept the lights off inside my cabin. From the window, I watched as HOA trucks circled my property like wolves. This wasn't over. No, Karen was plotting her next move. And I needed to be ready. The morning sun had barely risen when I heard the sound of tires crunching against gravel. A black and white patrol car rolled up my driveway. My chest tightened, not because I feared the law, but because I knew who called them. Karen stepped out from behind the patrol car, arms folded and smirk glued to her face. "Finally," she said, "someone with real authority." The sheriff, a tall man with a slow drawl, adjusted his hat and looked at me. "Son, we got a complaint from the HOA. Says you're occupying property that doesn't belong to you." I stayed calm. Years on the force had taught me that panic was your enemy. I reached inside my cabin and pulled out a folder, the deeds, tax records, and permits, everything. I handed it over. "With all due respect, Sheriff, this land is mine. Been mine for 10 years. You'll see the paperwork proves it." The sheriff flipped through the documents. His brows furrowed. "Well, this looks solid. HOA claims otherwise, though. They've got paperwork too. Karen interrupted, her voice sharp. Sheriff, don't waste time. We're moving forward with repossession. He's trespassing. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough for the sheriff to hear. Sheriff, I'm a cop. Badge number 4127, Metro Division. I know a forgery when I see one. That HOA paperwork is fake. Check the signatures, the stamps, they won't hold up in court. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. He looked at Karen. Is that true? Because if it is, you're in serious trouble. For the first time, Karen's mask cracked. She stammered, tried to redirect the conversation, but the sheriff wasn't buying it. He closed my folder, handed it back, and said. Far as I can tell, this cabin stays put until a judge says otherwise. Karen's face turned crimson. She jabbed a finger at me. This isn't over. You'll regret this. The sheriff tipped his hat and drove off, leaving Karen fuming in the dust. But I knew better than to relax. Karen had tasted power for too long to stop now. She wouldn't rest until she either owned my cabin or destroyed it completely. And the way she stormed off that day, I had no doubt she was already planning her next strike. Days passed with an uneasy calm. The HOA trucks were gone, the contractors disappeared, and for a moment, it almost felt like I'd won. But when someone like Karen goes quiet, it's never because they've given up. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to a strange noise, like wood cracking under pressure. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. That's when I saw it. The beams under my porch had been sawed halfway through. Someone wanted my cabin to collapse. My blood boiled. This wasn't just about property anymore, this was sabotage. Whoever did this wanted me gone, permanently. I inspected the damage. The cuts were deliberate, precise, and done with a professional saw. It wasn't some random vandal, this was planned. The next morning, I confronted Karen. She was standing outside another neighbor's home, clipboard in hand, pretending like nothing happened. Enjoying your little power games? I asked. She blinked innocently. I have no idea what you're talking about. I stepped closer. Someone tried to bring down my cabin last night. If you think that'll scare me off, you've underestimated me. Her lips curled into a thin smile. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you this place isn't meant to stand. I clenched my jaw. Or maybe it's telling me to expose the criminals hiding behind clipboards and fake rules. She walked away without another word, but I knew, she was behind it. That evening, I set up cameras around the cabin. If she, or her lackeys, tried anything again, I'd have proof. And proof came faster than I expected. 2 nights later, the cameras caught movement. 3 men in HOA jackets were sneaking around my cabin, carrying tools and cans of gasoline. They weren't just going to sabotage, they were planning to burn it down. Watching that footage, I felt my chest tighten with rage. They thought I'd just sit there and let them destroy everything I built. Not a chance. As a cop, I knew the law would catch up eventually. But as a man defending his home, I wasn't about to wait. I loaded my truck, grabbed my badge, and prepared for a showdown Karen would never forget. The night I caught those men on camera, I knew the time for warnings was over. Karen had escalated this into open warfare, and it was time I fought back. I drove into town, handed the footage to the sheriff, and filed an official report. Arson, trespassing, conspiracy, the list of charges was enough to bury an ordinary citizen. But Karen wasn't ordinary. She was slippery, connected, and ruthless. The sheriff sighed. This is solid evidence, but Karen's got influence. You need to be ready, this could drag out. Drag out or not, I said firmly, I'm not losing my home. When I returned to my cabin, HOA trucks were back again, parked along the road like vultures circling prey. And there she was, Karen herself, standing in front of my cabin with her arms crossed. "You think tattling to the sheriff will save you," she sneered. "This cabin will be mine, one way or another." I stepped forward, badge gleaming in my hand. "Not only am I the owner, Karen, I'm a cop. And every step you take from here is being documented. This isn't your game anymore. This is a criminal investigation." Her smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "Do you really think your badge scares me? I've taken down bigger men than you." Her arrogance was breathtaking. But behind her bravado, I saw the flicker of fear. She hadn't expected me to fight back with the law and with strategy. Neighbors began to gather again, murmuring about the chaos. Some sided with me, others with the HOA. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Karen raised her voice so everyone could hear. "This man is unstable. He's abusing his badge to bully the HOA. He doesn't belong here." I looked at the crowd, then back at her. 10 years. 10 years I've lived here, worked here, paid taxes here. If anyone doesn't belong, it's you, because the HOA didn't even exist when I built this cabin. And you all know it." Silence fell. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, Karen's narrative was cracking. But I knew she wasn't finished. Karen was the type to go down swinging, and I had a bad feeling the worst was still ahead. And I was right. Because that night, the HOA wasn't just coming for my cabin. They were coming for me. The night air was heavy, the kind that made silence feel louder. I sat inside my cabin, lights off, watching the security feed. My instincts told me Karen wasn't done, and instincts like mine had kept me alive on the force. At exactly midnight, I saw headlights creeping up the dirt road. 4 trucks. Their engines cut before reaching my property, and shadows slipped out, moving in the dark. They weren't here to talk. I tightened my grip on the flashlight in one hand, badge and firearm holstered at my side. My duty wasn't to start a fight, but to end one. The cameras caught them circling the cabin. One man carried a crowbar, another a canister. My jaw clenched. It was the same men from before. They were back to finish what they started. I stepped out onto the porch. "That's far enough," I called. The men froze. Karen's voice rang out from behind them. "He's bluffing. Move in and finish it." Her command was chilling. She was ready to risk it all, just to claim a cabin that was never hers. I pulled my badge and held it high. "This is official police business now. Every one of you is on camera. Step back, or you'll be charged with arson, trespassing, and conspiracy." The men hesitated, shifting nervously. But Karen hissed at them. "Don't listen to him. He's desperate. This cabin belongs to us." I took a deep breath and raised my voice so the whole valley could hear. "This cabin isn't just wood and nails. It's 10 years of my life. If they burn it, they burn my blood, sweat, and soul. But I promise you this, justice will not forget tonight." The men faltered. One dropped his crowbar and backed away. Another muttered, "This ain't worth it." Karen shrieked, furious. "Cowards! Do you know who you're crossing? I'll ruin all of you." But the spell was broken. One by one, the men retreated to their trucks, leaving Karen standing alone, seething. I stared her down. "You're finished, Karen. This isn't about rules anymore. This is about crimes. And you just exposed yourself to everyone watching." Her face twisted with rage, but there was fear in her eyes. The HOA war wasn't over, but Karen's grip was starting to slip. Weeks later, the fight shifted from dirt roads to polished floors. Court. Karen had pushed the HOA to file a lawsuit against me, claiming illegal construction and non-compliance. She showed up in a sleek suit, her army of lawyers in tow. I walked in with a folder, a decade of documents, and a quiet confidence only the truth can give. The judge listened as Karen's lawyers painted me as a rogue builder who refused to follow community rules. They used big words like precedent and statutory obligation. But when it was my turn, I stood, held up my deed, and spoke plainly. Your Honor, I bought this land before the HOA existed. I've paid taxes, followed building codes, and lived here peacefully for 10 years. This cabin isn't just legal, it's my life's work. The courtroom murmured. Karen rolled her eyes, but I pressed on. The HOA forged documents, attempted sabotage, and even tried to burn my property down. I have evidence. Security footage, sheriff's reports, and testimony from neighbors who saw it happen. The judge leaned forward, clearly disturbed. He called for the footage to be played. The screen flickered, showing the men in HOA jackets sneaking around with gasoline. Gasps filled the courtroom. Karen's smug expression evaporated. The judge slammed his gavel. This evidence is damning. Unless the HOA has a legitimate defense, these actions are criminal. Karen's lawyers scrambled, stammering excuses. But the damage was done. The neighbors in the gallery whispered, glaring at her. I looked at Karen. For the first time, she wasn't smirking. She was pale. Cornered. The judge announced an investigation into the HOA's leadership. My cabin was officially declared mine and mine alone. Relief washed over me, but it wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't the type to surrender gracefully. As the court adjourned, she leaned close and hissed. You may have won today, but I'll make sure you pay in ways the law can't touch. Her words sent a chill down my spine. This battle was won, but the war with Karen wasn't over. Life slowly returned to normal. The HOA's power weakened under the investigation. Neighbors stopped siding with Karen. And for the first time in months, I felt like my cabin was safe again. But Karen wasn't done. Late one evening, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a single note. If I can't have it, neither can you. My heart sank. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. I reinforced my security, double-checked the cameras, and stayed alert. Days passed without incident, until one stormy night. Lightning split the sky as I heard footsteps outside. My cameras caught Karen herself, alone this time, carrying a canister. She was desperate, reckless. I burst out the door, rain pelting down, and shouted. Drop it, Karen. She froze, drenched, wild-eyed. You ruined me, she screamed. The HOA's gone, my reputation's destroyed. This was supposed to be mine. Her voice cracked. For the first time, I saw not arrogance, but desperation. She wasn't fighting for the HOA anymore, she was fighting because she had nothing left. I stepped forward slowly. Karen, listen to yourself. You let power consume you. But this cabin? It was never yours to begin with. She trembled, gripping the canister. For a terrifying moment, I thought she'd strike the match. But instead, she dropped to her knees, sobbing, rain mixing with tears. By the time deputies arrived, Karen was silent. They took her away in handcuffs, charged not just with forgery and sabotage, but attempted arson. As the trucks drove off, I stood in the storm, staring at my cabin. 10 years of work, almost stolen in one day. But it stood strong. And so did I. Months later, the storm had passed, not just the one in the sky, but the storm of the HOA. Karen was gone, stripped of her title and facing charges. The HOA crumbled without her. Neighbors who once whispered now nodded respectfully when they passed. And me? I finally sat on my porch, sipping black coffee, just as I had dreamed for 10 years. The cabin stood tall, scars of the battle etched into its wood, but stronger for it. Every creak of the beams, every nail, every stone reminded me of the fight. Not just to build it, but to protect it. Looking back, I realized this story wasn't just about property. It was about resilience. About standing up when someone tries to take what you've earned. Karen had thought she could steal my cabin in a single day. But she never expected I was a cop. She never expected I'd fight back with truth, with law, and with a heart too stubborn to quit. Neighbors often ask if I regret it, if I wish I had moved somewhere without HOA drama. But I just smile. This cabin isn't just a home. It's proof. Proof that no matter who tries to control you, no one can steal your soul if you stand your ground. The sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in gold. I leaned back in my chair, finally at peace. The battle was over. The cabin was mine. And no HOA would ever take it away again.